Okay, so today on the Live on Form podcast, we are joined by Human 24 ambassador, former UK Special Forces, peak performance coach, and founder of the Modern Warrior Project, Lindsay Bruce. Lindsay, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks, my friend. How are you?
Excellent, excellent. So obviously you're a Human 24 ambassador, so therefore there's a whole bunch of defining characteristics as to why that would have happened, which I guess we're going to expand on and get into. But often with many guests, it's starting at the start, going through the evolution of you as an individual, and hopefully along the way, sort of picking up some life experiences, things you've been through, things you've done, etc., etc. So I'm gonna hand it straight over to you, and you tell me about yourself, and then we'll organically go where it goes.
Okay, so I mean, how long have you got on this podcast? You want to start right at the beginning?
Well, I always like to look at people's upbringing, because obviously you've followed a particular path. You went, you served for your country, you went down that military road. So I think it's all often interesting to find why that path was chosen. Was it something that was chosen for you? Was it something that you chose yourself? Was it something that was just by default? How did that all occur?
I mean, I know that you're a fan of the saying, you become a product of the environment, right? So I suppose it's a multitude of things, some good, some not bad, but some kind of typical. So, for example, there's a lot of family history in the military from where I come from. So, my dad, his two brothers are both in the services. My dad was in the same regiment as I first joined. My dad was actually from Skye originally. So this is the funny thing is, my dad was brought up in the Isle of Skye. He ended up joining a Glasgow regiment. Now the reason for that was because he moved to Glasgow when he was like 15 to go to the big smoke to experience life. Yeah. And he was just what we call Tuchters, right? They call them Tuchters up in Scotland, which is people from the Highlands. I'm essentially a Tuchter as well, right? Anywhere north of Glasgow. Anyway, so my dad joined the RHF, which is the Royal Highland Fusiliers. It's now all changed. It's called Two Scots now, but the old way of military terms and the manning behind the Scottish regiments, it was the Royal Highland Fusiliers. So he joined them back in 66, I think it was, long before I was born, obviously. And he left pretty much about a year after I was born. So I was about one. My dad left the forces, and then there were four of us. So there was myself, my two older brothers, and my older sister. So I was the youngest of four. And we were all brought up in Fort William. So Fort William was typically a Highland regiment area as well. So because my dad had joined a Glasgow regiment, my oldest brother joined, my second oldest brother joined. It almost became a natural process for me just to follow in the footsteps. I did actually dabble with ideas of doing something different, but to be honest with you, in school I did really badly. I mean, I hardly went to school for the last year of my school days. I just had no interest in the school curriculum whatsoever. And I was just kind of bumming around Fort William. The thing is, what I always go back to saying is I always had ambition. So I was always a very ambitious kid. I always wanted to do well. I always wanted to earn money. I wanted to do something that was of significance to contribute to society or whatever it was. But I just hadn't found my niche as a child. I was a very sort of mixed up kid because I just didn't enjoy school. As a result of that, I hardly went, like I said. And as a result of that, I left school without any qualifications. Didn't even sit my exams because all I wanted to do was get a job and earn money. So the ambition was there. The thing is, in my mind, it was like, I want to do well, but I didn't really understand that to have a career or go to college, university and go the traditional path of education to follow on to then good career prospects, I just didn't really accept the fact that you had to be educated to do that. So it wasn't a lack of drive or a lack of will to succeed. It was just a case of the school curriculum and the way it was run didn't really suit me as a child. So it was one of those situations where you're brought up in a small town. There's a few things you can do. You can become a drug addict, an alcoholic. You can become a general waster, basically. You can get a job in a factory. Or you can move out of town and do something like join the army. So I decided at the age of 17 I was going to join the army. Two older brothers were already there, had been for several years at that point. like I said, my dad, my uncles had been in the military. So that's how the whole military thing really started. I'd also been in the army cadets and all that stuff. So I'd had a bit of a taste of the military side of life. But I would say it was my oldest brothers, my older brothers and my dad that were really the key influence in me wanting to do that. And I suppose I looked up to them, especially when you get two older brothers coming home and leave. They've got money. They've got that level of kind of, I don't know, significance, if you like. They're from a small town. They move away. Every time they come back, they're like the boys that have done well. So it seemed like a good option to me. And I always remember when the battalion was posted to Germany, my brother was like, come over to Germany. You'll be living the dream. You'll be getting extra money. Cars are cheaper. Everything's cheaper. So it just seemed like this really attractive prospect because I was doing nothing at the time apart from, I think I was working in a welding shop at the time. I was an apprentice welder for a local engineering firm. And although I quite liked that job, I thought, I've got to get out of here. I just had that itchy feet syndrome and I thought, I have to do something in my life. So that's how it all started. I signed up, and back then you could sign up for the army one day, and then within about 3 or 4 weeks, you could be actually, you could start your service. It was a very quick process.
Yeah, it's so that initial path was that pressured by your dad or your brother, or was it just you were sort of following suit and they were just encouraging you and going, yeah, this is a good move, this is the right way to go, or was it did they expect that of you before that?
Well, the other side to this is something that I probably don't talk about that much, but I was the youngest of four, like I said. Now, when my dad, when my brothers were going through their teenage years, my dad was still very much like a military sergeant major in the way he treated them a lot of the time. So, they got it pretty tough from my dad. And they were brought up in a way that they had quite not a hard upbringing. They had a really loving upbringing, but they didn't get away with anything. It wasn't unlike my dad to give him a bit of a clip around the ear, so to speak. I've been very, very careful with my words there. There's sometimes a little bit more kind of, bit more full on than that.
Different times,
different times, right? So they didn't get away with much. So by the time it came around to me, I think my mum was a bit more protective of me in the way that, she didn't really want me to join the army. She was like, that's my youngest boy, it's my baby, I want him to stay at home. And she would kind of manipulate that when I was a lot younger and say, well, you're not going to join the army, are you? I'd be like, no, Mum, I'm going to stay at home with you,
Yeah.
And obviously, as you mature, as you your priorities change as you get older, it's like, well, maybe that's going to have to change. But I would say that my dad used to say to me things like, because I didn't go to school in the last year, because I was out pissing around with my mates, coming home late, going out getting pissed, that type of thing. My dad would often allude to the fact that, the army would be too hard for me. I wasn't going to make it. I wasn't a patch for my brothers, that type of thing. And I think you should maybe say it for maybe a double-edged sword there, because in some ways he said it to antagonize me. In other ways, he said it because he wanted to push me in the right direction and give me that kick up the ass that I needed. But it did sit quite kind of, it was molten inside, it was always burning away in my mind. I thought, and I suppose some part of me was like, I'll show you kind of thing. And I had a great relationship with my dad, but at the same time, I suppose there was a part of me who wanted to prove him wrong. So it was encouraged, but in the same way, it was kind of antagonistic in some ways, I would say.
It's interesting because I guess as we explore your mindset, and I know you pretty well. I know how you think about things, and we always pull it back to that glass half full scenario. But I think when you antagonize somebody in that way, you tell somebody they can't do something. You have two people. You have the person that believes it, or the person that will do everything they can to prove the person wrong. And whether that's molded early in life, later in life, people figure it out, whatever. It's interesting how that now follows on with the narrative that we'll get into as to how that sort of evolved and how that journey evolved. So at this point, you've joined the Royal Highland Fusiliers.
Yeah.
Are you in with your brothers?
Yeah. So when I joined, I mean, they were 7 and 9 years older than me, respectively. So I joined at 17. They were like 25 and 27 at the time. Both doing pretty well.
And pretty well established in the regiment, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So you've come in, and this is always, it's a bit like having an older brother at school, right? How how is this? So you go in, do you have contact with them? Do you speak to them? Do you see them? How does it work?
Yeah, so when you go through basic trainings, so your unit, which is your battalion, so a battalion is just a name for a unit, you know, it's a battle group, which is about 400 to 500 men. So when you go through basic training, you then get posted to your respective battalion unit, right? So we were in Germany at the time. My brother was actually a training corporal around that time and was just finishing there and coming back to Germany. So long story short, three of us were serving at the same time in Germany. So yeah, as you can imagine, it's like shoes to fill, right? So my dad, then there were still people in the battalion at that point who had known my dad, and my dad had a really, really formidable reputation as a sniper, as the guy who was like a really well-known, phenomenal soldier, by all accounts. And I need a lot of respect from some of the older generation. So this youngest Bruce brother then comes along, you know, several years younger than the one previous, and they're both doing well. Probably, I think that's probably a testament to the way that they were brought up. You know, they were brought up by my dad, who molded them in a certain way that at the time they probably didn't think that was doing them the best then, but actually it was molding the character and the resilience of that individual going into the army to then follow a path that was essentially going to be a successful career. And both of them stayed in for like 22 years apiece.
Wow.
Longer than I did.
Yeah. It's a long time.
You know? So yeah, you got this situation where I'm the youngest brother going in and thinking to myself, in one hand, I'm going, yeah, okay, my two older brothers are there, they've got my back. But if I don't pull my shit together and produce the goods, then, you know, that's not going to look too good on them. And it's not going to make me feel too good, right? So there's a lot of pressure involved with that as well.
And I guess with that, it's that thing where people expect you to have the exact same temperament, right? You have the same temperament, you react the same way, you have the same skills, and I guess that kind of follows suit. Again, it's like the older brother at school scenario, is that they're talented at sport, they expect you to be talented at sport, and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
So obviously, you've all got your different skill sets, and then from that, you've served for how many years in the Fusiliers?
So I did 5 years in the Fusiliers before I did selection. Yeah, before I went and did SF selection.
So tell me about selection. Yeah. So whilst you're in the Fusiliers, is this something that's been kind of thrown at you? People saying, "Look, you should go for selection." Or
no, this is the thing, right? This is a funny thing. Out of the three of us, the three of us, like I said, my oldest brother. We used to have these within the regiments, the infantry regiments. Everyone's got like what we call a SAS SID, right? There's a SAS SID in every single unit. And a SAS SID is essentially the guy who everyone looks upon to be like the front runner for selection.
Right.
Everything about them just screams, green and keen, right? They're just mad about the army. They're
right. So what is that?
So my oldest brother, right? So my oldest brother was that guy.
Right.
Right. And I always say like he was a far better soldier than I ever was, you know, and this is me just being, not just me being, you know, just full of humility here, but I would look up to him as being like this super soldier. I mean, he was a phenomenal soldier, took very much after my dad. He was very, very like my dad in that respect. He's born to be a soldier. Uber keen, really switched on, and just an all-round good egg for what he'd want as a soldier. And I always said that if he had got into the regiment, he'd have done very, very well within there as well. He would have been tailor-made for it, right? So you had my oldest brother, George, he was like the SAS SID, because he's just this guy that people used to speak about, and people would say, like, your brother, best soldier I've ever come across, and he's great at what he does, and he's a lot of respect in that sense as well. My other brother, he went a different path, you see. He didn't really go mainstream, stay mainstream in a rifle, what we call a rifle company. He went to the there was like a pipes and drums platoon. So my brother was a very good piper, like bagpipes. And the pipes and drums platoon were also the machine gun platoon. So it was just it was part of what we call support companies. So they would specialize in machine guns.
Yeah.
So he went off the mainstream path. So that's just a kind of different way to go within your career. You know, everything plays a part, but there's mainstream up the middle, which is your rifle companies, which is typical a typical path for that would then be something like selection, right? Depends on the unit. I'll go into that as well. But the RHF wasn't one of those units that would typically send people to try SF selection. Now, this is a really, really good topic, right? Which I think we should go into in a bit more depth, maybe a bit later on. But you've got the mainstream way, which is, you know, rifle company, and then you've got these different aspects that my brother was in one of them.
Yep.
So out of the three of us, you know, and I followed my oldest brother's path, so I went mainstream as well. But at the time, you know, going back to your original question, I wasn't really the guy who people were going, you should go for it. I was still finding my feet, and I was still very young. So typically people would go for selection maybe after about 7 or 8 years of service. Usually the average age, I think, is about 27, 28. Back when I did it. I actually went when I was 22, which is actually very young for that course. It's just not the typical thing to do. So I suppose, being the way I was, it just go back to my school days. I always wanted to have more. You know, I always wanted to be successful. I always wanted to be the best in whatever it was that I did.
Yep.
Right. So I think that was more of a sort of natural mindset that I always had. I was always very tenacious, very determined as a character. As far back as I can remember, I was always very determined. It's just something that I've always had within me. But, you know, I actually wasn't the guy who was the typical one out of everybody, or out of me and my two brothers, that would then be the guy who was going to go to the SAS. Because again, I was very much in the embryonic stages of my career still at the time when I went. Really, I'd only been in 5 years, and I'd done quite a lot. Within that 5 years, I'd actually achieved quite a lot for my age. So I'd been promoted very quickly. I was going for my second promotion very young, and it all started to just come together for me. So I had done a couple of like external courses, done pretty well, and you know, I had quite good natural leadership skills. I was a good soldier, but I just wasn't the SASID guy, I wouldn't say, right? So I was probably going to be the guy who would do well in the mainstream career path, but it just wasn't really a thing that people were talking about, me going for SAS selection. But I think it was after reading a couple of books, I just get really, really kind of obsessed with the whole idea. And I always saw this as, if I can do this, the couple of things that I was thinking about, it was like, if I can do this, one, it'll be a phenomenal career path to go on. It'll be a phenomenal job to do. You know, there is no better job than an SAS soldier in the British Army, if that's your thing. But at the same time, it was like, going back to what my dad used to say to me as a kid, I thought that would really be going one better. And one that would kind of prove him wrong, but at the same time, it would make him really, really proud, because he always really admired the SAS. So I thought that would make him really proud, and it would prove him wrong, right? So I'm not going to lie. I mean, that was part of my thought process. But mostly down the route of, I wanted to make him proud. You know, that was always you know, the forefront of my mind. And my oldest brother was a massive influence in, because he was like, you know, he was the kind of guy who would play it down and go, don't see this as big as it is. It's just a course. Just see this as a course. You're going on and just attend it like you would any other course. Don't give yourself a chance to, you know, give up at any point. And he had actually been for selection twice, my oldest brother, who was essentially the one who I perceive as being the best candidate to pass that. And he just got really unlucky. He just got injured. He got injured twice on the course, really badly, to the point where he tried to keep going, but they just pulled him off. Choice of words not the best there. But it took him off the course, and he just ended up staying the mainstream career path. He did really well in that. You know, he went far, but as things unfolded, you know, he ended up settling down with his now wife, and he's got 3 kids and all the rest of it. So he doesn't have any regrets in that respect. But, you know, going back to what you're originally saying, I wasn't really the typical choice, although I ended up being the one to go for it, just because my life at the time was kind of set up to fully potentiate that, because I was single and no kids. I had the world at my feet in that respect, you know. So it was just a pivotal moment, really.
So you've been encouraged by your brother. Your brother's been through selection. I was actually going to ask, how many shots do you get? Is there a limit? Are the people like trying for selection again and again and again and again, or is it kind of a 3 You get 3 goes and that's it, or
no? At the end of the day, the reality is they want people to join, right? So they've got to recruit like every other unit in the world. It's just a case of, if you wanted to take customers into your business and you had very strict rules and ethos within your company, and whether it be staff, whether it be customers, if you had a barrier that was set at a certain level, and you says, right, if people can't afford this price, they don't get in, or if people can't live up to these standards, they don't get in, they can't work for me. Well, it's the same kind of thing within the special forces. They've got a barrier that's set at a certain height, and they will not budge that barrier in any way, shape, or form just to get more people in. So it's a very, very strict level of adherence to a certain level of standards.
Yeah.
But they still want people to join. So going back to business, if it was business and customers or clients or efficient staff, you still want a good team. You still want enough customers to make money in your business and make your business successful.
Yeah.
But you won't do that at the risk of dropping your standards. So that's kind of the way it happens. But they still want people to join. So the way that it's kind of run is, if you went for selection tomorrow and you broke your ankle, well, that's not then one go. That's not one shot gone.
Yeah, it's a mishap.
You can still go back as many times as you like. So there was actually a guy on my selection. I always remember this guy. He was a great guy as well. I forget his name, but he was a lad from the engineers or something, and it was his 4th time on selection. It was his 4th chance, and the reason he'd come off 3 times previously is because he got injured or ill on selection.
Yeah.
Time before that, he got all the way through to near the end of the jungle phase, and he got blood poisoning, and then he got taken off the course, came back again. The course that he was on with me, he broke his leg really badly, and I think that was pretty much the end of it for him. I think he had broken his leg so badly that it just wouldn't have been wise for him to even try it again. The recovery process would be too lengthy. But my point being that was his 4th attempt. Now, the only way that changes if you either fail or you jack. And jack just means you give up, right?
Yeah.
If you jack at any point, you can never come back, because that says a lot in their eyes. Yeah. Because if you're on a hill march and you get to a checkpoint and you say, oh, I'm tired, or I've got a sore leg, or I want to give up, right? Then there's no chance you're going to come back, because if that happens in training on a day that you've got options, then we don't have an option. You don't have an option, right? If someone's life depends on behind enemy lines, you get some guy in your patrol who says, I don't want to go any further. There's lives at stake. It's not the kind of guy they can have, right? So that's the only thing that's different. If you jack at any stage, you forget it. That's it. You never come back. There is no kind of, are you sure about this? It's like, oh, there's no arguments either. So I always remember one of the days. It was one of those days in selection where I really needed a bit of a kick up the ass, both externally and internally. And I was going towards a checkpoint. I had really bad Achilles tendonitis at the time. I really suffered with my Achilles on selection. And I was going towards this checkpoint in a place called Elan Valley. Those who know Elan Valley know how shit the terrain is. It's just like these little baby head things, the little grass tufts.
Yeah.
Fucking everywhere, right? And when your feet are covered in blisters, your fucking ankles are so. I mean, I had really, really bad Achilles tendonitis. It was excruciating. And I was going towards this checkpoint, and I knew that I was behind time. Going by my time distance speed on the route and by my watch and stuff, I was like, shit, I'm like half an hour behind on the timing that I need to make to get in on time for this march. And on test week, I mean, at the end of the hills phase in selection, there's test week, right? So test week is like 6 back-to-back marches, each one increasing in distance. And the final march is called endurance, which is like 65 kilometers over the Brecon Beacons. And it's all on your own. So this one particular march was about, 30 Ks or something like that. I was like 2/3 of the way around, and I noticed I was actually dropping back in time. One of the guys who was in front of me went up to the checkpoint, and there's a big van. I used to call it the jack wagon, big brown van, and it's got space in the back for troops. If you want to jack at any point, you get in the wagon, and then you're off. You have to come up. That's you off course. And there's one of the DS who's in the passenger side taking your name, and ticking you off and giving you your next grid reference to then going your way. And I always remember going towards the checkpoint and I was just like absolutely fucking hanging out, right? I was just in shit state. Tired, hungry, fucking sore. Morale was pretty low. And there was a guy in front of me who was actually a senior captain from whatever regiment he was from, I forget. But he was one of the guys who, on the very first day of selection, I had looked at and thought and felt intimidated. You know, when you ever been to a bodybuilding competition or any competitor, powerlifting meet, it doesn't matter where you go, if you're up against someone else or there's someone as a comparison to you, you always have that comparison syndrome in your mind going, am I good enough? And, you know, that you're riddled with self-doubt and shit like that. And you just kind of get in your own head, don't you? Well, on day one of selection, and you're sat in the cookhouse at Sennybridge camp, and there's like, I don't know, 250 people there. And you know the pass rate is like stupidly low, right? There's like 12 to 18 people on average, I think it is, that will make the whole course and badge at the end of the course. So when I turned up on this day, and I'm surrounded by all these older, more experienced soldiers, I'm saying to myself, you know, fucking, what am I doing here? You know, I'm just this like little junior NCO from the Royal Highland Fusiliers, a little Fort William tutor who is way out of his fucking depth, right? I'm just looking around and feeling stupidly intimidated by everybody around me. And this guy, anyway, he was one of the guys who was like one of the senior, biggest, he was a big lad. He just looked like he had a lot about him. And I always remember looking at him on day one going, fuck me, you know, that's the caliber they're after, then I'm fucked, right? Yeah. And then this checkpoint, then going forward in time, he was in front of me at this checkpoint. And it's weird how your mind works out, because sometimes the most simplest of things, it can be something, just listen, something, you know, an auditory message, it could be something you see, it could be anything. It can just change your biochemistry within a split second. And he was at a checkpoint and he said, gave his name and he says VW, which stands for voluntary withdrawal, which means, you know, you want to give up, basically. So I'm questioning myself at this point, going, fucking hell, you know, am I fit? Am I going to do this? Am I behind time? I'm going to fail, all these things. And as soon as he said VW staff, and the guy who was a DS at the time, a guy called Robbie, who I've got phenomenal amounts of respect for, he was like the chief instructor in the course, another Scottish guy. And he was all for the jock. He was like trying to, you know, cheer the jocks on, getting to pass, because there wasn't a lot of jocks passing. He said, like, we need jocks in the race. So this guy, he says, like, get in the back of the wagon. And as soon as that happened, I was like, he's fucking jacked.
Level 2.
He was one of the guys who I was intimidated by. And it was just almost like someone had like fucking put a rock up my ass. And then Robbie says to me, you're behind time. And I was like, yeah, no staff. He says, move your fucking arse. And I always remember that he just basically looked at me, his fucking steely-eyed look. He says, move your fucking arse. And I was like, yes, staff. I'm not going to argue with that. And away I went. And it was almost like the pain went. I rock up my ass.
And that sounds like a lot of time to make up, right? Half an hour.
Yeah, well, I did, but it was just almost like this fucking. It's just crazy how the mind and the body adapt in certain situations to give you that spike of adrenaline and you know, get where you need to be. And you know, that obviously is a simultaneous thing from your body and mind to actually do that you can actually, you know, kind of manifest that energy to then just go to the next level. But I'll never forget that. That was one of the moments that I always remember from being on selection, because it was when I went from an all-time low to then just going, fuck this, you know.
Yeah, here we go.
Let's get this on.
So it's kind of the media depiction. See, we've conversed about this before, that the media depiction, and obviously, you know, people at home listening to this and people who aren't familiar with the forces will be listening to this and sort of thinking, when you mentioned DSAs, they have the media version of what a DS is with all the TV shows and things like this. So, and obviously you've just said he looked at you with these steely eyes and told you to get a fucking move on. Now, the whole sort of breaking down of people, you know, we had this conversation about this, about, you know, is it the reality that you're on this course that is notoriously hard? In fact, I could be wrong here, but it's classed as one of the hardest selections in the world, right? I'd say it's the hardest selection. I think. Yeah. So the hardest selection of any military force in the world, right? And this is again, you know, we'll get on to how regarded the SAS are, because that's something I think people don't quite grasp. as to the magnitude of what we're talking about here. And you know, there's this media depiction of these people just constantly around you, trying to get in your head, trying to mentally break you, trying to hammer you down, and blah blah blah. So is that truly what selection is like? Is it these people who are constantly trying to get you to fail, to try and quit, to try and do all of this, or does the course itself just look after that?
No, this is the thing, right? And I mean, I know a couple of guys that are on the SAS program, for example. I'm not taking nothing away from them, because you know, some good blokes that run that program. I know Billy very well. You know, I served with Billy. He actually, Billy Billingham, that's on SAS Who Wins. He was one of my DS on selection. He was one of the instructors on it, so I know him really well. I know him in that side of the fence, and I also know him by working with him in the squadron as well, because we're the same squadron. You know, we're in Iraq together, all the rest of it. And you know, he's authentic in the way he is, because he is like that. But at the same time, you got to realize that it's for TV, right? So the first thing I'll say is, what they do on that course is very different to anything on selection, because it's not a military course. It's simply test your mettle. You know, fucking hell week, basically, right? It's just to see if you can handle it and get through it. So there's no similarities at all with it. A very, very, very small amount, if anything. Because what you got to realize is that on selection, the candidates that are going in selection are professional soldiers. Well, they should be. And they're people who have been in for usually several years at the time. So they've done all the bullshit. They've done all the getting shouted at. So you don't get shouted at on selection. This is the other thing. It's like, there isn't all this screaming in your face shit. It doesn't happen. That's just not what the SAS is about. And the instructors, it's more the opposite. It's kind of, I don't know what would be better, actually, whether you get shouted at and you know where you stand, or someone just not saying anything, then turning away and writing in a notebook when you fucked up, because that's like, holy fuck, what have we done? You know,
what you said. That
gets inside your head, because it's like the psychological operations, right? Old psyops. So the media, you know, this has all been blown out of proportion because it's a successful TV show, right? And it is what it is. It's there to get viewers. It's there to make money. So that it'll be what they want it to be, and that'll be controlled by the people that are making the program. Right? And as I've told you before, I was asked originally to do that program as a DS, and I didn't fancy it, because I didn't really like how it was laid out, or I didn't, and also I didn't like. I'll be really honest and say that I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be that guy who goes down that route. That's a decision you make, and you know the consequences. I'm proud of the fact that I served in the regiment. I would always like to have that connection. As you know, as we know, we spoke about obviously having experience ourselves not too far, not too long ago, having the pleasure of being involved with that, and that's a special relationship, I think, that is really valued in my eyes. And any amount of sort of money, or I'm not interested in being fucking famous. I don't really. That's not me at all. So no amount of money or fame and anything like that is going to be worth your integrity. And again, I'm not taking anything away from the guys who have done that. I've got respect for them, but at the same time, that is a decision they've made for whatever reasons they've made it for. Best of luck to them. But what you have there is a media picture of what the regiment is, and it's just not anything like it. Nothing's really the same. It's just a beasting session. It's not a military skills course. I mean, in the regiment, on selection, should I say, you get tested on your military skills. They don't get taught military skills or anything like that. So they're not tested on that. It's purely just a fucking thrashing session.
Yeah, I guess probably the closest similarity is the mental and physical challenge, right? It's just it's a variation on that.
But the thing is, selection's 6 months long. You've got the time, and it's very, very specific in the nature of the beast, as in what you're taught, and because you're taken through, skills and lessons that they want you to learn to then serve in their regiment, right? They're training someone to be one of them. Whereas this TV thing is just are you tough enough kind of thing. It's like, see if you can get to the end of it and still be standing at the end. and it's a very different thing. So you get, and I've had people say to me loads of times, oh, so is it like selection? Is it really the same? I'm like, don't be so fucking stupid. Of course it's not. But they've only got a week. It's entertainment. It's good entertainment. I think it's great for TV. I think it's great for the people who watch it. I think it's a successful program. No one, I'm not going to have the audacity to say just turn my nose up at it, because it's been really successful, right? And the things that are successful, I tend to respect rather than kind of, beat down with a hammer. I'd rather say, fair play to them, good luck. Just not for me.
Yeah, it's a bit like it's like a crime drama, isn't it? Is you want to, the first thing I do after watching a crime drama, kind of true life crime drama, is I Google it to see, is this a true depiction of events? And I think that's always the case. You want to know what a true depiction of events are. And again, another conversation that we had was about, films, right? We were like, what films are actually a pretty true depiction? You see these YouTube, you get the military guys on YouTube who, it's typically the American guys, but they pull apart these scenes they say there's no way they'd do that, and they wouldn't do that, and they wouldn't enter a building like that, and they wouldn't do. And it's always interesting to see what's genuine, what isn't, and what have you. So you've gone through this insane, and again to add some context here, because again some people won't get this, because the SAS is regarded as the utmost and probably most respected military force in the world, right? The SAS consult with, Delta Force, with Navy SEALs, with all the other fighting forces in the world. When they want to learn something or know about something or whatever it might be, they turn to the SAS and they ask them what would they do or how would they do it. So I mean, people, I don't think the general public or a lot of the people listening to this will get that magnitude and understand how exceptional and how insane this is. And you're talking, what was the 250 people in selection?
Yeah, around that, yeah.
250 people, and they're expecting what, 6 to 12, did you say? 6 to 12 people getting through?
I think 12 to about 12 was like the average number, I think. Sometimes less. I did hear of a course that wasn't that long ago that was something like 4 people passed it. It was something ridiculous, ridiculously low. And the thing is, as well, I had a conversation with someone not so long ago. Like, even though things like the SAS program is good for awareness and recruitment, it's not really about awareness, because what we have to realize is that we're living in different times now. So the whole mystique, if you like, of the regiment, which was kind of where the kudos was, right? That was kind of the cool thing about it. Like, no one really knew much about it because it wasn't in the public eye.
Yeah.
There was like the Iranian embassy siege was like the thing that put it in the spotlight with the media, because that was obviously fucking in broad daylight.
Hey, I had I think it was the 1983 annual. I think it was at the SAS.
Oh yeah, you told me this.
1983, and I remember it. I remember it had a red cover. It had a guy in a, he had his balaclava on and blah 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 on the front. It had the siege, but it actually had photographs, actual genuine, BBC photographs of the siege on the embassy, which was kind of was that sort of the first true media exposure?
That was it. That was just like, it really put when people used to think about the SAS, it was like they just think of guys in black suits and respirators. That was kind of the first public perception that was ever available. Because it just wasn't really. I mean, I think it's back then. TV had like 4 channels. Well, then it was probably three. Then it was actually 3 channels on TV.
Channels, yeah.
It was before Channel 4. We'll remember Channel 4 coming out. Like
Channel 4 coming out, and Channel 5.
Channel 5. That was way after
the million that followed.
Yeah, but I mean, it was 3 channels on TV. There wasn't a lot of sources of information. There was obviously no internet or anything like that. So you only had certain windows of opportunity to find out about anything. So when that happened, it was like, okay, the snooker was the snooker finals was on at the time. Cliff Thorburn playing, I can't remember who it was, but it was
Steve Davis.
Yeah, I think it was actually. It was the snooker finals, and it cut off. That was live, and it cut off, and then went straight to this live stream of the Iranian embassy at Princess Gate, and then all the fucking, is that actually B Squadron as well? My old squadron that did that up in Nimrod, and everyone was like, fucking obviously, who are these guys? Like guys from the shadows coming out of nowhere, and being called in to do what
And if I recall, it was a pretty, you know, the actual operation from the point it started to it finish. Obviously, you don't see what's gone on, you know, and I say the operation, but I say when they actually initiated it and did what they had to do, it was so quick.
Yeah.
You know, it was a very rapid sort of thing. It was
huge. I mean, that's what it's designed to do. I mean, there's two options you've always got without going to tactical stuff, but you've either got an emergency response, which is like the ER, or you've got a deliberate response. A deliberate response is something you can plan, go at your own pace, and press the go button when you decide to press go. An emergency response is that you're in there as soon as possible, like yesterday kind of thing. You know, something has to change now. And that's usually an event that happens that turns the tables to then get the green light for that. But it always comes from higher level command.
Yeah, no, I remember reading the book. I mean, I must have sat and read it a million times. And you know, as a kid, you know, the army's always, you know, your first port of call is, you know, the army sounds like sounds like the deal. It sounds like real sort of place. And certainly a lot of people that I went to school with, they went down military routes because it was, you know, I think, you know, my age demographic, I think it was still sort of a big, it was a family thing. People, if your dad served, you served, and it was, you know, and people just followed the suit. I think it's a slightly different process now. I think people opt for the military for a multitude of reasons, maybe the same reasons, a bit more apparent, right? So you've gone through selection. Let's fast forward a little bit. So you've made it, right? So you've finished selection. You've gone through. Whereabouts in selection were you when you got pulled up on this hill?
Well, that was like the thing is, selection is actually broken down into modules, basically.
Yeah.
So the first module, which is the hills phase, which is known as aptitude. So the clue is in the word, right? Is to see if you can be suitable for the course. You know, a lot of people think selection is the hills. It's not. That's just the first part. It's just 4 weeks in the Brecon Beacons and surrounding areas. To test your physical aptitude. Right. So the physical aptitude, and they're not even looking at you as a soldier at that point. You know, they're just saying
it's
you
just,
can get from A to B.
Have you got the
lungs,
have you got the endurance, the resilience? Have you got all those basic requisites, right?
I mean, they'll notice character traits, but they will notice character traits at that point because there are certain things that anyone can pick up on by someone's character.
Yeah.
And that will be identified pretty easily. But you're not being cross-examined on your soldiering skills, or you're not doing any shooting or any basic fieldcraft. You're just not doing anything that is deemed as soldiering skills other than being able to have the physical capability of going from A to B in a certain time. Well, how you get there is up to you, but they don't monitor that either. It's a case of be there at that checkpoint, turn up on time. They'll give you another grid reference to the next checkpoint. You cross the finish line on time, you passed. Yeah. There was this little Gurkha lad that was in my course. I mean, he was one of those guys who, like, he was like 5 foot nothing, fit as hell, and came from the Pathfinders, which is like an elite part of the army. Everyone would obviously analyze the route, and if you're good at map reading or navigating, you know, you could find the best route in order to get there quickly, safely, most effectively. But this Gurkha lad was just like, as the crow flies, grid reference, point to the target, and then just go in a straight line.
Goes in a straight line.
You know, instead of going like go high and dry around it.
But you think it sums up the Gurkhas to some degree, right?
But the thing is, he passed. He did it, and he was just like this fucking super fit bloke who just. I mean, he didn't pass selection, but it's just an example of what I said. They don't care how you get there; you just need to get there. So they're not looking at you as, you know, why did you choose that route? It's like, fucking be there. If you're not there, then you fail. So that's only the first 4 weeks. So after the first 4 weeks of selection, what usually happens, I think numbers wise, like 250 is whittled down to about 50.
Okay.
Right. And
really, that many drop out in the hills.
They lose a lot of that in the first week.
Hence why you got these big vans to take people away.
Yeah, exactly. So then you get 5 more months after that. But I would say that the pivotal moment on selection, when you think that, you know what, I've made it this far, I think I'm going to have a good chance of passing the whole thing here, is at the end of the jungle phase. Yeah. And notoriously, the jungle phase is selection. That's the hardest part. It's the part where you're most likely to fail. It tests your mental and physical resilience like nothing else. It's a very hard place to operate the jungle. It's not for everybody. And it is the core, it's the core skills of soldiering at its best. You have to have your shit squared away in the jungle. If your admin's up your ass, you can't look after your feet or your weapon or anything else, it will be identified, because you do get cross-examined on that. It's every single detail. You know, it's microscopic level of being judged. You know, but at the same time, they just want you to do the basics very, very well. That's it. You know, and that is really selection for a lot of people. And when you pass selection, and when you pass the hills, sorry, not hills, the jungle phase of selection, they don't tell you till you get back to Hereford either. So you've got this long flight from Brunei back to the UK, still wondering if you've passed or not. There's a reason for that. But when you pass that, they deem it as the hardcore element of selection. So they say to you, look, you're now the hardcore element of this course. Technically speaking, we should only lose a handful of people moving forward from this moment, because nothing else is going to be as hard as that. It's really all about learning skills and just getting the work done.
So there's, you know, I'm guessing the jungle is, you know, in Brunei is humid, hot, wet.
Yeah, snails. Yeah, it's hard, and you that is, you know, your feathers are ruffled very quickly in that as well, because when you go into the jungle, the first thing you do is you do like a range package in the first week. So you do live firing, which again is very, very nerve-wracking. It's like anxiety fucking overload, because again, it's live firing, so a lot can go wrong if you don't have your shit together. And you're doing a lot of, you're on the range a lot, having your skills tested, contact drills, all that sort of stuff. So, and you're being closely monitored by a lot of DS. So there's a lot of eyes on you. That's very, I would say that's mentally quite taxing, because, you know, when you're under any sort of testing environment, it's always going to be a lot of pressure, right? And I think that's probably one of the most, the highest levels of pressure that you get on the course. And then after that, you're in the jungle, and it's every little thing. You know, it's things like, you know, if you haven't applied enough cam cream, if one of your pouches is open, and you forgot about it, and it's identified, it's taken down as a note, and all this is put towards, you know, is this person good enough or not? You know, and then they all talk about it. It's a bit like a round table of, you know, directive staff saying, you know, this guy, you know, I've seen him doing this in the ranges, and you know, well, but yeah, I saw him doing that as well. Well, do we really want to pass this guy? It's very, very closely monitored. So yeah, you know, that's I would say the pivotal moment really on the whole thing.
So I'm going to ask you that it's a bit like a driving test scenario. Did you pass first time?
Oh, driving test, not fucking third time.
I'm talking about selection.
Selection. Selection. Yeah, selection. Yeah, only pass first time. Yeah.
First time. Crazy. And yeah. I'm guessing at the start of this, you know, we go back to the 250 people that started, right? You're talking people who are physically very, very fit, mentally probably doing pretty well. You know, good mindsets. Probably they wouldn't have applied, I guess, or wouldn't have been put forward if that wasn't the case. And it whittles down from 250 to 50 based off the hills is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And,
I think that
yeah,
18 or something like that.
Wow.
Past the course.
So you're in, ready to serve. So whereabouts? So you've passed. You're in. You know, what occurs after that? Are you straight off and you know, you're serving, or is there more training?
So you're always training. I mean, the training doesn't ever stop. It just depends which part of the cycle that you're on.
Yep.
So you go to your respective squadron. So in the regiment, you got 4 saber, what they call saber squadrons, and they're basically each a carbon copy of each other. So I went to B squadron, boat troop. So you get 4 troops in each squadron.
Yep.
This is all public information. Everyone knows this, but I'm just copying you with a bit of brand placement here as well. So the squadrons are a carbon copy of each other. Within each squadron, you've got 4 troops that specialise in various skill sets. So you've got boat troop, which I was in. You've got air troop, or free fall troop, as it's sometimes called. And you've got mobility troop, which is all like vehicle stuff. And you get mountain troop, which is obviously the guys who specialise in mountaineering. And each troop will then obviously contribute to the overall efforts of a squadron. doing any particular job. So, you know, if you had the reason for that is because if you had to cross an expansive water, then obviously the boat troop guys would head that up and get people across there with their skills. And likewise for every other troop, but you do cross train as well. So you would specialize on an insertion skill, they call it, but then you would also do other things that would get you to a certain level of skills within every single troop. So everyone's kind of qualified to do everything to a point, not necessarily free fall or anything, but you know, you usually cross train to at some point anyway. And the training is always ongoing. It's either operations or training. You know, but usually when you go in operations, there's always some sort of build up to that as well.
So how do they pick you for that? So when they're going, you know, when you've been selected, and they're going, right, who's going to go in boat squadron, who's going to go in, you know, mountaineering, who's going to go in, you know, the air, who's going to, you know, how is that picked? Is that during selection? There's a certain set of skills that you've shown.
Yeah. They know who's going to pass. At a certain point, they know who's going to pass, right? So going towards badge, it's a bit of an anticlimax in some ways, because after the jungle, you get told if you passed or not. So it's a crescendo moment.
Yeah.
And it's either pass or fail, right? But it's a bit like X Factor, actually. We used to do an X Factor where they put everyone in one room,
right,
and then everyone else in the other room, and they go, right, you've passed or you've failed. It's kind of like that. But anyway, there's a bit of a crescendo moment at the end of the jungle phase, which again is only halfway through. When you get badged, you've known you're going to get badged for like weeks, because you go, well, I can't really fail now unless I do something really fucking stupid.
Yeah.
You know, so you know you're going to pass. So in some ways, that's for organizational purposes, because they want to start placing people in squadrons, right? So you can pick, you can actually bid for a squadron and a troop. So let's say I'm in B squadron boat troop, and you come on selection 6 months after me, and you go, oh, my mate's in B squadron boat troop, I'm going to go for that.
Right.
You might get it, but you might not, because obviously they have to then place where it's needed. So they're down a guy, they need a guy in boat troop, bang, there you go. I put into the B squadron, I got my squadron. There was no reason for that other than the fact that by the time, and actually funny, just after what I'm saying a minute ago, doing something really stupid, one of my mates who I was really pally in selection with, we both put in for our squadron and troop on the same day, like when everyone did. And he actually failed. So he did do something really fucking stupid towards the end and didn't get in. But I'd already put in for B squadron, purely because that's what he went for. So both of us were going the same.
Oh, so there wasn't a preference for you. So I'm guessing it.
Not really. I didn't know anyone. I was the first guy. I missed that out, but I was the first guy from the Royal Highland Fusiliers to get in.
Ever? Not
ever. There was one officer, a guy called Colonel Edwards. He was actually my commanding officer when I joined the RHF, and he had been in the regiment. He did 1 tour as a troop commander. That was back in the 70s.
Oh, so wow!
Since the 70s,
the second person from the Royal Highland Fusiliers.
Yeah. First other rank. So there hadn't been any. There was one officer in the past, but I was the first non-commissioned officer ever. But then it's like the Roger Bannister moment, right? That's the other thing when it comes to self-belief and all the rest of it, or belief in general. I mean, those that go before us, sort of thing. Stand on the shoulders of giants and all that sort of stuff. No one had gone for selection because they thought it was too hard. People had gone and failed. But my brother was one of them. He didn't fail, but he came off an injury. He was the SAS Sid who had come back. Other SAS Sids in the past had gone and failed.
So so from RHF where you were, who was the SAS Sid? Were they there? Did they get in?
This is what I mean. So
no, the one out of your battalion.
Yeah, so, none of them did. Obviously,
none of them did.
But there had been many. There had been many SAS Sids type characters, right? And none of them ever get in. So the message that sends to everyone else is that, well, if he can't do it, neither can I.
Yeah. And
right.
You weren't in the SAS Sid. You've got in, and now all of a sudden,
there's a fucking huge lesson there, right? And
how many since you? How many since you? How many since you?
Well, this is what I'm going to say, right? 12 months after I passed and successfully got in, for the first time ever, there were 5 people from the Royal Highland Fusiliers went on selection.
Wow.
2 passed.
Amazing.
The percentage there from 5, I don't know what exactly, it's probably 40%. Yeah, it is 40% of those who tried actually passed. I guarantee that's a higher percentage than the parachute regiment, but the difference being the parachute regiment, it's kind of normal for them. They don't have SAS SIDS. They all go for it at some stage. A lot of them do anyway. There's a high percentage of parachute regiment soldiers go for selection. Hence why there's a huge proportion of the regiment that is made up of parachute regiment, because they send a shit ton of guys and a shit ton pass. But the percentile with, from who goes to who passes is probably, I don't know, maybe 10 to 20%. But they send enough people to get some through the net. Whereas we didn't send anybody. It wasn't that I was special. I'm the first guy to get in, so I'm extra special and better than everyone. It's fuck all to do with that. I mean, the fact was that I just happened to try it, and I got in. But if I had been amongst 20 other people, maybe 5 of us would have get in. So you can only get in if you actually try. So yeah, the point of that is that a bit like the Roger Bannister situation, where no one had run a 4-minute mile because didn't think it was humanly possible. A year later, something like 10 did it. So
setting that mantle, right?
Absolutely.
And self-belief, I guess, in many respects. So I'm, with the four sort of segments there, you've got, and I'm thinking this because I'm not good with height, right? And it doesn't matter how much, and I've got used to them over the years. I'm better. I think I could jump out of a plane. I actually have biggest problems when there's something I can see that I'm going to land on. That got compounded when I saw very, very sadly, I saw a guy die actually, who tried to jump over a set of escalators. So there was an up and down escalator and tried to jump. He was actually getting chased by this. I was part of a security team in a unit, and he tried to jump over and slipped and landed on a big marble floor below. And
you mean like through the gap or whatever it was?
Through the gap. So it was, so that didn't help. But I have this height thing, right?
Yeah.
So I'm thinking at this point, there's going to be guys there, and we're talking elite guys, very fit, very mentally. But if you've got a fear of heights, you've got a fear of heights, right?
Yeah.
So is there an element of, I don't like heights, I'm going to stay away from the air and the mountain, and I'm going to go with the boat?
Actually, there is actually an element of that, because I didn't go for boat trip because I didn't really like. I thought the swimming test was one of the hardest things I didn't select. I was,
and you can have people who are scared of water, right?
I wasn't a huge fan of water at all. I nearly drowned multiple times when I was in the regiment through being in water. Right, so I wasn't a huge fan of it. I went for air troop because I wanted to do free falling. I didn't really have a thing with height. I didn't really have a fear with heights. So when it came to parachuting, everyone does parachuting, but it was never something that bothered me. I don't know why, it just wasn't a natural fear for me. But when it came to water, I'd almost drowned as a kid about 3 times. One particular occasion scared the shit. I wouldn't go in the water for ages. I wasn't a very strong swimmer. I was scared of water.
Yeah, and
at the same time, if you might have this mechanism in your brain. I know a lot of people will. Is like, because you're scared of it, you want to overcome it. It drives you towards it rather than shy away from it. And I think it goes. That's kind of cross threads through everything in life. I think sometimes the more you're fearful of something, the more you should run at it rather than shy away from it. Unless it's just something like you just don't like doing, or you can outsource a job or whatever. But it's something is going to get to you if you don't master that fear or overcome that fear, and it's something you should run towards, definitely. As a calculated risk, obviously. But I mean, when it comes to water, like, very quickly, I'll tell you, when we did our selection for, when you put in for your squadron, your troop, and you say, I want to go B squadron, I want to go air troop, and you go, well, you're going to boats instead. We all went into the training officer, who's the guy who runs the whole selection course. Training officer then says, right, Bruce, fucking B squadron, boat troop. Yes, sir. That's the way it happens. No arguments. So a good pal of mine, I think he's actually still in the regiment as well. He's a very good friend of mine, another Scottish lad. He hated water. He just hated water. Right. He also put in for air troop. So both of us went in to see the training officer, and he says, right, Bruce, I won't tell you those guy's name, but he says, both boat troop. And he said, I just like, I'm just glad to be here, kind of thing. And I'll go anywhere you want me to. And then he said, I I don't really like I don't really like water. I'm not a very strong swimmer, so. And then his answer was, "Don't worry about it." He says, "You don't need to be a fucking swimmer." He says, "You'll be in a fucking boat." He says, but he just like, his face was shut kind of thing, you know. But yeah, there's a lot of that. People that avoid air trip because they don't want to jump out of a plane. People who avoid mountains because they don't like heights of, you know, don't like abseiling or climbing. So it does happen. But at the same time, like anything, you know, someone shooting at you is not very nice, right? But I don't think anyone likes that unless they're not wired up right. So, but everyone has to do that. It's part of the job. If you get shot at, you get shot at. It's not a nice situation, but you're trained in a way to respond a certain way. So when it comes to doing something that's potentially life-threatening, but you have to do it anyway, then that's what training is there for, right? I mean, that's why you train. It's a drill. You just you unconsciously enter the drill like you do in training, when it's, you know, it's people shooting at you in, you know, in a false capacity rather than in real life. You do something in training very well. By the time it happens in reality, if you're trained to do it well, then your response is going to be right? And that can be something like jumping out of a plane, or likewise, you know. So yeah, but there is an element of that, definitely.
I mean, that's a really interesting sort of analogy you made there. Is that, you know, nobody on the planet, unless they're, as you say, wired incorrectly, are going to enjoy people shooting at them, right? And, you know, when you've got live weaponry, you've got grenades, you've got all manner of things, you know, you've got all those things. But I guess nobody develops kind of a phobia towards being shot at, right?
Well, look at do you think a UFC fighter enjoys being punched in the face?
Yeah, no, but again, as a child, unless obviously someone's punched you in the face as a child, you know, you don't kind of develop this almost irrational fear, right? You know, I heard, you know, somebody talking about spiders, and particularly in the UK, right, is that we don't have any spiders that can potentially cause you any real harm, right?
Yeah.
You know, worst kind of scenario is a bee sting or whatever it might be, but people have this irrational fear. And you know, when you dig into those fears, you're like, well, you know, why are you scared of it? Why are you this, that? But you can't apply that to something like being shot at. Why are you scared of being shot at? I'm like, because I'm being shot at. You know, you can't.
Yeah,
it's a rational fear. It is actually a rational fear, and you know, those things you know, they're interesting, you know, when you look at them from a psychological perspective anyways. But that's a massive rabbit hole. I'm sure we could go down, but we'd probably need a third person who can psychologically break it down for us. But so how many years did you serve? You were in the SAS for
6 years.
6 years, and during that time, you served around the world.
So I went to when I was in the Royal Fusiliers, I'd been to like Northern Ireland, Kosovo. Then in the regiment, went back to Northern Ireland, went to Bosnia, went to Afghanistan several times, Iraq many times. But I also worked in Iraq and Afghanistan when I left the regiment as well. So I've been to both those places multiple times. Yeah.
Okay. But and when you left, you went out there to, was that like a continuation of work? Is that a continuity as to what people do when they leave? Do you go out? Do you do private work? How does it work? Yeah,
it's all private security stuff. So when I left, when I eventually decided to leave the regiment, I thankfully walked straight into a job. I had a friend who worked for a firm that was local, actually, in Hereford, and they had a few different contracts in place. They had media contracts, they had training contracts. So I initially, ironically, you know, I became a teacher when I left the army. You know, having that terrible experience in school and not really, you know, understanding or getting on with the curriculum, and then the first job I get when I leave the military is to teach people who are highly educated. You know, I was teaching, like, you know, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, the, you know, reporters, cameramen, people who had a brain in their head, basically.
And what were you teaching them?
It was, you know, the course that I ran was called Surviving Hostile Regions. So it was basically how to look after yourself in a hostile environment, and if shit goes wrong, this is the things that to consider, and here are some things to be aware of. And it went from really basic things like how to pack your kit, way up to, you know, if you come under attack. So and medical training and stuff like that as well. So I was a patrol medic when I was in the regiment. So I had worked as a trauma medic in several different UK hospitals by the time I left, but during my time in the regiment, yeah. So you get highly trained. You get highly trained as a trauma medic, if that's what you choose to do.
So where does that sort of qualification as such or experience? You're right.
It doesn't
like
cross.
Paramedic or
no. It doesn't cross over directly. No, it's purely for the military. A lot of the things you do would be similar, but there are things that you do within that course that are to a level of something a doctor would do.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because when you're behind enemy lines in a foreign country, you can't call 999.
Yeah.
You don't have doctors. So you're self-sufficient. So you need to be trained in every eventuality, and really the stats for that were like you had to do prolonged field care for up to 5 days in case you were deep behind enemy lines and couldn't get out. So you're trained to the level of looking after a casualty and being supplied with the kit that would be required for that to maintain someone's life for up to 5 days, depending on the illness or injury. Obviously would depend on the situation.
So is that a skill set that you actually utilize quite a lot?
Thankfully, no. I did a few times when I was in, but thankfully, actually during my time, nothing that was life threatening that was in my hands ever, and I'm glad about that.
Yeah, it's a lot of responsibility, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. But but the skill itself is something you can also choose to do. So when you join, there are two things you can do. You can specialize in demolitions. You can specialize in medical stuff. So I chose the medic route because I thought I was just kind of interested in that. I was always interested in anatomy, physiology and stuff anyway. So that's just the path I chose to go down. But yeah, it's really, really high level training with that as well. You get a lot of experience. And when you go to hospitals, in fact, when you go to the hospitals, you get a lot of hands-on, a hell of a lot of hands-on, because the consultants that are connected with the regiment, there's always someone in there who is kind of well connected.
Yeah,
they know who you are, but no one else does, kind of thing. So you get put into this A&E department, for example, of a hospital. You get given a bit of a cover story as to who you are, and the consultants will be like, "Let these guys get hands on." It's all supervised, but you do get hands on. Yeah, I miss all that actually. It's pretty awesome.
You said there, kind of, you get given this sort of this pseudonym or whatever it might be, and the sort of stealth undercover kind of aspect of, and I'm guessing there's elements that you can't talk about and can never talk about, but it's and that mystique sort of overlies it all, which I think is the and the fascinating thing about the Iranian thing is the embassy is that these are things that happen behind closed doors. People don't see, people don't witness, people aren't aware they're happening, but they happen, right? And I think that is one of the real mystiques about it all, is that these things that happen that nobody will ever know about, and nobody, but
exactly,
fundamentally you're there to keep the you keep the country safe, you keep other countries safe. I mean, you guys you're not only representing the UK, you're actually you're fighting and doing your things for multiples of countries in multiples of conflict zones, which is remarkable in itself. So
you say that about the whole the cover stories and stuff, but there was one occasion where myself and a good pal of mine both went and got attached to Edinburgh Royal Infirmary, and like I say, no one knows. The general medical staff, like the nurses and the doctors, they don't really know who you are. You get given a cover story to tell. But we turned up at day one of this hospital attachment, call it, and it was like for about a month at a time. And one of the registrars that were there on this shift, we went up to this guy and said, we're here to do this attachment. This is who we are. And he goes, are you the two? And there was loads of people around at the time as well. Like, quite a lot of staff that was in earshot. And he says, "Oh, are you the two SAS guys?" Right? We were like, mate, fucking screw the nuts sort of thing. Shh, keep that quiet if you know about it. You're not supposed to know that. And if you do, then shut up about it. But what he actually meant was Scottish Ambulance Service, because that's what they call them. They call them Scottish Ambulance Service. So they call them
that
the
was
SAS.
your cover story. Your cover story was the Scottish
Ambulance Service. So they call them the SAS guys. But it's just pure coincidence in terminology.
Right.
Yeah, so we're like, hey mate, be quiet.
Nobody's meant to know we're in the Scottish ambulance service. It's all meant to be undercover. Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. So so post service. So I'm sure, hey, I think we'll do round 2 of this at some point, because I think there's so much to dig into, and there's so much to, you know, it's fascinating. But, you know, post service, and what always fascinates me is that transition. This again is something that we've talked about, and I've talked about on multiple podcasts now with certainly ex-professional sports people, ex-military, people who've came from these almost like institutions, right? Where that's all they know, and that's all you know. You know sport, that's all you do. You play that. You know military, that's all you do, and that you've been, you know, that's the life and breath of everything that you are, and it's that defining. You know, we've spent the whole time talking about the military, but there's far more to talk about with respect to Lindsay Bruce, and, you know, everything that follows on from that. But for a huge chunk of your life, you're in that institution, you're in that mindset that, you know, you live, you breathe, you sleep it, and that transition from that. So tell me what that transition was like, where, you know, you've came out, you've obviously got the security detail where you're training, you know, the cameramen, the reporters, all of those things, which was something actually I've never considered. You know, do these guys get training to be in these areas? And you see them, you know, they're stood on BBC and what have you, and there's bombs going off behind them, and it's, you know, it's crazy. You know, he's keeping his composure for somebody who's probably, you know, never.
The thing is, it's a bit like I was actually having this conversation last week with my oldest brother, actually, because we were actually talking about Tony Robbins, right? And Tony Robbins, who is, if you look at a Tony Robbins video or something, or you watch that Netflix documentary, you'll see him on the camera, and you'll see an audience behind him, but everywhere he goes, it's just him. But I used to work at some Tony Robbins events some time ago, and like I've been to a lot of his events, but wherever he goes, there are like 4 guys crouched down, walking around, like crouched down, like everybody goes like a diamond formation around.
Crouched down, like
so they obviously, and the reason being is because he wants them out of shot, right? So he doesn't want this distractive vision of having a security detail in camera shots. So they're just purely crouched down to stay out of the frame.
Oh, right. So they're squatted. I'm picturing people crawling along the floor here. So
they literally like they're crouched down and walking along. Like, I'm not going to do it, give you a visual representation of that, but if you can imagine, we crouched down and we're walking along bent, leant over. That's what they do. And he's got a security detail that is close to him everywhere he goes, right? So we think about that. If you look at a correspondent doing a live shot in a hostile environment anywhere in the world, guarantee that every single time you see them on TV, especially if you've got the body armor and the helmets on and stuff, there'll be someone within an arm's distance almost, right? Maybe just outside that. There's someone there. So that's pretty much what I did. And when you're there, there's an advisor, and it's very low key. A lot of time you embed and attach yourself to a military unit, but again, you're solely responsible for that reporter on the ground, so or that crew. So they've always got security detail with them in these hostile regions. So a lot of time, you would stop somewhere, get out and say, right, you've got 1 minute. It's too hostile hanging out here. Get out, get it done. If you fuck it up, doesn't matter. Get back in the car, we're going. So that's the reason for that. It's because they need that element of advisory role and protection, and to get them out of shit if it goes noisy as well.
I have pictures of, you've watched the Sherlock Holmes movie, right? The one with Robert Downey.
You know what? I've never seen it, but I don't know why, because I've heard it.
So there's so it goes through. So he looks at a scene, and he goes through in his head this kind of reverse engineers what's going to happen in these scenes, which is always, obviously until the movie came out, but I'd always depicted it like this thing where, what are the things that you're clocking? What are the things that you've been trained to look at that nobody else is really looking at? And that without getting into your head, obviously we're never going to be able to figure that one out. But there's all these things that you're aware of, that you're trained to be aware of, that other people probably wouldn't notice. Like, you said there about the timing of when's it time to get out? When's it time to move on? When is there a threatening, when is someone walking or encroaching on a particular or when does it look like somebody's going to be a threat to that individual? And I know that you also did some personal security stuff, and you looked after some celebrities and things like that, which I guess is exactly the same skill set, right? It's the same thing. It's just a different type of conflict. It's a different type of threat.
It comes down to it's situational awareness at any level. So it's a bit like if I said to you, let's say we've got Phil there, and we've got someone who's never been inside a gym before, and to walk through that gym and just subconsciously monitor how people are training.
Yeah.
Right. You will without even mean it, you probably wouldn't be able to help yourself. If someone's not doing a squat properly, it'll be like bang. It'll be like really, really obvious to you.
Yeah.
But to the untrained individual, will walk past and just go, oh, they're just training. The training's training. It's all the same. So it's kind of the same thing. You become hyper aware of this. I forget. It's like, I think it's the part of like what they call the reticular activating system in the brain. So like, if you go and buy a car that you think no one's got, chances are, as soon as you get in that car, start driving it, you'll see 3 that day, right? It's because it's just the way the brain learns and develops, is that once you see something once and become accustomed to that and become hyper aware of it, then you can't unsee it. So, I cover this sort of stuff in my coaching program, but I mean, it's just basic situational awareness. So that's the skill set that, I went from the basic level all the way up to advanced level, special forces, all the rest of it. You can apply those principles in life. You can apply them to work in any environment. I mean, there's certain things like discipline, resilience, these types of things will get you through anything in life, right? And it's just, all it is being a bit of a chameleon and adapting it to certain situations that require maybe a little bit of deviation in one direction or the other. So whether it's looking after a camera crew, being as part of a military unit, looking after a celebrity walking down a high street, the same principles are always involved. Situational awareness, what is a threat? What could be a perceived threat? What are you going to do in the event that that threat becomes real? It's pretty simple when you think about it like that, but no different to what you're good at. You've got a very, very successful career and things that you've done, and there are things that you would notice that someone else that hasn't been in your field would.
Yeah, details, right? It's your ability to look at details, but I'm sure there's far more to it, and I'm sure there's far more situational awareness things that you're conscious of that many people wouldn't even consider. So again, that fascinates me. Genuinely does.
Again, it becomes is it conscious or is it unconscious? Thing. It's really unconscious because, like I say, it's like the analogy of the person doing a bad squat in the gym. Right? That's unconscious to you. You don't have to think about is that person doing a bad squat. You couldn't not see it because you're that highly trained.
Yeah, no, I always say with coaches, and again using something like a squat as an example, the same thing is that I'll know what they're doing wrong, but I struggle to explain to you what that was. It's just I've seen it so many times that I know what the cue is to move them and correct them to do it. If I was to break it down into, why did you choose that? How did you choose it? I find it really difficult to do it. And I remember doing an exercise. There was a magazine asked me about. It was actually some rehab work I did with an elite athlete, and they'd asked me to do a piece on the rehab, and I'd never actually stepped back and looked at it from a perspective of what are the things I'm looking at. And it was a really interesting exercise to go, it's a bit like me taking you into a situation and saying, right, Lindsay, I want you to write about that situation and all the things that you became aware of or needed to become aware of in that situation and write it down on paper. And then, it was this sort of awareness thing of, oh, wow, I never thought I considered that, but I did. And they're interested in those things. So you've gone out, you've done your private security stuff. You've done your, you've looked after some pretty famous people, that I'm aware of, and done some sort of private security for them. And then you come to today, right? So where did everything, where did your career head and how did it head there? And what was your interest and where's it brought you to where you are now? Obviously you run the Modern Warrior program, which is your program, which we'll talk about in a moment. But kind of what got you to that point? I mean, we're congesting probably 10 years into a very brief conversation here, but
I mean, it's been a funny old journey, funny old path, because there's a lot of I would say there's a lot of identity issues along the way from that point to this point. So not by way of not knowing who I am, it's just that sometimes you fall into situations and you can't quite put your finger on what's wrong, but you just know that something isn't quite right. And it sometimes takes you a little while to actually realize that and get to the place where you think you should be, or have been destined to be, as cheesy as it sounds, right? But you can dabble in various things, and then you can realize either very quickly or sometimes a bit later that it's actually not what you want to do or what you should be doing. People go through life doing that. People go through a whole career being very unhappy because they hate the job or don't feel fulfilled, and then don't ever do anything about it. Then just they go in that kind of that monotony of just doing things because that's kind of what society says they should do, whether it's education, the direct route, then going to college, university, get a job. There's a lot of people who do that who end up very unhappy, I would say. So for me, I was always the kind of person that I would do what I thought I wanted to do, at the same time being paid for it, at the same time having a life and enjoying things. But when it came to the transition between going from the military to then becoming a civilian, there was a bit of a buffer zone within that, because obviously I went from being in the military to then being in a job that required using military type skills or experience, as well as working with ex-military guys.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of continuity from one to the other. Where it got difficult was when I went from that to then owning a gym, starting a business. That was like the transition was a lot more difficult because it was so different, dealing with very different people on a daily basis, having to learn about how to run a business, which always, I'm still learning that. But it was a complete contrast to what I'd been used to. And at the time I didn't really realize it, but looking back now, connecting the dots, looking back, I realized how difficult that was, and how much internal battle that cost me as well, many times. But when I look at the core fundamentals of how I lived my life, you look back to when I was bodybuilding, and obviously we got to know each other through bodybuilding, right? That's how we initially become friends. And you were my coach for some time, as I'm sure people are aware. And it was all about the structure. It was about discipline. It was about structure. It was about, when you think about bodybuilding, it requires a lot of discipline, a lot of structure. It's all going towards something. It's kind of like when you leave the military, you almost like lose a purpose, lose a mission. You lose a massive part of your identity. Being an SAS soldier and having, I suppose, this level of significance within my own mind. Not necessarily in an egotistical sense, but it is a value that a lot of people do hold quite highly, with feeling like they matter, feeling like they are contributing towards something. If you look at the whole human needs structure, there's a lot of it goes within that. So when you take that away or step outside of that, then there's a lot of these things that are then kind of stripped away from you. You're now on your own. You don't have that camaraderie, that brotherhood. You don't have the support mechanism. You don't have necessarily the everything laid out for you. It's like you're on your own. And although I had the skill set and the discipline to go on my own, there was just a lot of it was missing for me. It was a very sort of confusing time, I would say. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. For a long time when I had the gym, I honestly, I'll admit it, I was like, where is this going? Where am I going? Where is this going? And I think in a lot of ways, the whole bodybuilding thing, which was obviously quite a lengthy career as a bodybuilder, it was like nearly as long as my military career. When I look at it, it was almost a decade lifespan of being a competitive bodybuilder. And I think in a lot of ways, it was very much a distraction. It was something I loved doing, but at the same time, I don't think it really made me entirely happy, because there were things in my life that suffered as a result of doing that I get you. Do you know what I mean? It takes a lot of sacrifice, and I would say that there wasn't a lot of balance in my life then. It was something that I got very, very skewed in the wrong direction, because I was just like hyper focused on bodybuilding, and that was all I wanted to do. And as a result of that, there were other things that had to then sort of take a backseat. So yeah, it was a bit of a weird old time, really, when I think about it. But going from that, obviously, when I look back again, I wouldn't be where I am now without that. So again, it was for a reason. There was always a reason behind it. You know, I love doing it, and I learned a lot through bodybuilding. But at the same time, you know, looking back, it was part of something I had to go through in order to become the coach and the person I am today. A bit like my military career. I loved that. When it came time to leave, I knew it was time to leave and transition to something else. But every single chapter of my life has now got a place in what I do now. So it all does make sense. You know that whole Steve Jobs speech about, you know, when that famous Steve Jobs speech at Stanford University, it's years old, and he says about you sometimes can only make sense of the dots, connecting them going backwards, whatever he says, right? So you connect the dots looking back, and now I can genuinely say that I get that, because I don't see anything as a mistake at the time or something that I regret in any way. It was all going towards something that was eventually going to get me towards where my niche is, where my true fulfillment is. And that's only really come about, I would say, in the last 12 months. Realistically, you know, I'm 40, we're both the same age, 44. No one knew that, then I'm sorry, Phil. Now they do.
No, but totally dashed. I would, anyways.
You're still a little bit younger than me, aren't you? Like, you know, you picked me by a couple of months there. But what I'm trying to say is, like, what I do now, who I work with, the job that I do, I genuinely feel in a place where I'm like, I can't really imagine wanting to do anything else. It's like, I want to do other things, but I can't imagine not wanting to do this.
Yeah.
You know, the way I do it, who I work with, what I do, I love it. You know, I don't even see it as work. But that requires, there's different facets to what I do, obviously, within the Modern Warrior Project. And it's everything that I'd ever want to preach and live by myself. So, yeah, it's all been for a reason, but I suppose the transition's been quite a lengthy one.
Which I guess by default, it has to be, right? You know,
absolutely, yeah.
You know, you now take all those life experiences, you take everything that you've talked about, right from, you know, growing up, 3 older brothers, you know, all of that, you know, people telling you that you weren't going to achieve, or, you know, you weren't good enough, you weren't, whatever it might be, and how you dealt with that. You know, that's the carving out, in my view, of a mindset, of a type of mindset.
Yeah.
And then military refine that, but then you've got the institution of the military, which again becomes quite challenging, because you've then got to step away from that at some stage. You can't do that forever. And then you move into the other stuff where it's the backtracking, the Steve Jobs analogy, where you're going back and you're being reflective over everything, right? But in order to be reflective, you've got to have the skill of being able to be reflective and being critical and self-critical and not letting it absorb too much. And there's a whole myriad of things there that ultimately bring you to where, you know, and I'm aware of what you do now, and we'll just expand on that just a little bit, but bringing you to the Modern Warrior thing. And I get the bodybuilding thing. You know, the bodybuilding thing to me was always, you know, anybody I ever coached for bodybuilding, my hope was always, are they gonna take something positive out the end of this? Because there's a lot of negatives to that kind of process, you know, a lot of negatives. There's a lot of things where, you know, it would almost sound like I'm trying to convince people not to do it, but I also see the benefits of doing it. Yeah, I think it's absolutely a great process to go through, and it's a very, you know, you can learn a lot from it if you want to learn from it, or you can choose not to. You just do it and you continue to do it, and you then struggle to get out of that world. And I think that's the case a lot of people are in, where they struggle to migrate and move from that world. And certainly the people that have and are doing that now are certainly people my age, your age, you know, so it takes time. I think it does take time to find that. And obviously what you're doing now, you know, you've got, so tell us about the Modern Warrior Project. So the Modern Warrior Project is, you know, you're looking after people who are trying to almost emulate what you've done. You know, they're wanting to achieve and they want to succeed, and they've got their different versions of what that success and that performance looks like. So tell us a bit about the Modern Warrior Project and what it entails.
So, I mean, you've covered a bit of that there, but essentially it's about, and this really does complement, and it's complemented by the whole Human 24 model, right? Which is about high performance, human performance, peak performance, however you want to term it. I mean, I term myself as a peak performance coach. When it comes to peak performance, I think people sometimes get that confused with, in order to be a peak performer, you have to be an Olympic athlete or a CEO, right? You can just be a busy dad. Yep. It's like, whatever you're doing, are you performing at your best for what is going to make you happy and fulfilled in life? And those variations are vast. Everyone's different. So it's not like a cookie cutting approach to, start my course, finish my course, here's the course, and this is what you learn, and everyone ends up a kind of carbon copy of each other at the end of it. That just isn't realistic or even sensible. So it's taken someone on a journey from A to B, and that journey can be ongoing, depends on how long they want to stay there. It's bringing something from where they are now, knowing for a fact that they're maybe not fulfilled or necessarily happy with an element or certain elements of their life, and they want to bring balance, they want to bring standards up, they want to become a better human being, a more rounded human being, someone who thinks better, someone who performs better, someone who's better to be around. And I think everybody should want that. There are people out there who genuinely are happy, not giving a shit about how they look, how they feel. I don't actually believe that. In fact, maybe I contradict myself here, but I think people will maybe give you the perception that they are happy having a beer belly, not being fit, not being healthy, not having money. It could be anything that maybe is not necessarily at a peak level, but they're happy with that. I think people might say that, but I actually think that every single human on the planet is or should want to be on an ongoing journey of progress, because progress is the thing that will make someone happier, I think. Right? If you're moving ahead, it could be the most menial task in a day period. It could be doing something today that makes you feel like you've actually achieved something on this day that can make you feel cognitively happier, or that could be something over 5 years, 10 years, whatever.
I think it's a spectrum, isn't it? It's that spectrum.
Absolutely, yeah.
Content. I think being content and being happy, I think, is a massive spectrum. And I think there are people out there that are content with where they're at, but I think they're distinctly lacking in the happy aspect.
Yeah, it's like an itch. It's always there. It's like they go to sleep at night and think about it, or when they wake up in the morning, maybe think about it, or throughout the day. You can be content. Yeah, I think you can only be content for a period of time before something has to change. I think this is the universal law of the universe, in life, is that things have to go through change. Because if you just stay the same, then you might be happy for a little bit of time staying the same, but then eventually it'll be like, fucking bored. If you won the lottery tomorrow, it'd be for some people that might be great at the time. Go, I didn't have any money, now I'm loaded. But at some point, when the dopamine levels go back to baseline or below, then it's going to be like, I'm actually really unhappy.
You're the same person, just with more material goods, right?
You still got the same values and standards and beliefs. If that doesn't change, then money's not going to change it. It might make, like I said, make you happy for a little while, but eventually, that contrast is no longer there. You no longer have that desire to want more money or to whatever it is. There's so many examples we give of this, like bodybuilding. Again, the anticlimax that is often there on a day that you do a bodybuilding competition. All that effort, all that work, months of training, so many years of training, build up to this crescendo moment of being on stage covered in fake tan and oil and win, lose, or draw. It's like, you stood there and at the end of it, you go, fuck, is that it?
Yeah. And it's a subjective assessment, right?
Yeah,
this was always the thing about, powerlifting is subjective to some degree, because you've got three people with a button in the hand who will tell you whether you get a white light or a red light. And then, bodybuilding is similar, but you've got a line of 10 people looking at you from slightly different angles who are going to judge you based off, the thing that probably you're most insecure about, right? The irony of it all. It's a lot of people get into bodybuilding and physique transformation because they're insecure about themselves, but then they put themselves onto a stage to be judged. It
almost seems weird.
But that's really a process. But
the process, though. That's the thing that you said. I think it's the process, really, that I think most bodybuilders that are competitive for a long time, it's not about standing on stage. It's about the process. It's about the lifestyle. It's about what it entails. It's the kind of person that they identify as. They identify as a bodybuilder. That's what makes them feel good. and each to their own. I mean, it works for some, doesn't for others. And I think the ones that get the balance right have a lot of success.
Yeah.
Like, an example would be somebody like, I think, like Flex Lewis, for example. He's one that springs to mind when I think of a guy who has got, you look at his Instagram, he's like, he's a phenomenal bodybuilder, one of the best out there. He is happy family guy. He's an all-round happy individual by all accounts, a good human being. He's not a narcissist, and I think if you do get the balance right in any competitive sport or profession, as long as you're self-aware of everything in your life and not just over obsessed about one element, I think you've cracked it. It's when everything else goes to shit at the expense of an obsession.
Yeah.
And I've seen that more times in bodybuilding than anything else. People going into debt, people having eating disorders, people falling out with friends, broken down relationships, just because of the narcissistic traits that can often entail.
Yeah, which is a very, very deep rabbit hole that we could very
huge
go down. But
very.
No, I agree. I totally agree. I mean, I've seen it, and I always say that having a great physique can totally ruin a person. Having money can totally ruin a person. And they all have the capacity to do that. So I think anything that elicits that amount of change in anybody's lifestyle or the way they are or where they feel or anything like that has the potential to, you see humility almost stripped from people as they, they earn more money, the less humility they have, the more, and the same with the physique. The leaner somebody gets, the less humility they have. And you see this, and I mean, it's a remarkable thing.
Yeah.
But it's, so Modern Warrior Project, you're currently working with how many people?
So on my private coaching group, there's about 35 clients I have on there at the moment, and they obviously, that's like my personal clients. As you know, I'm in the process. This is a very new thing. It's only been the Modern Warrior projects have been around about a year now.
Yep.
So I was doing online coaching before that, but it was just more sort of like it was a more widespread demographic. So I used to work with,
This is a very focused program, right? So it's a very focused program.
Yeah, so it's typically men over 40. I have coached a couple of younger guys within that as well, because it's all about a vetting process, right? It's about who do you want to work with. So I am very, I mean, I know that's a bit of a cliche with, I'm very particular who I work with, which means that you work with anybody. Yeah, but it's genuine in my part. It's 100% genuine, and that's evident, I would say, because of the guys who I have on that group, because they are a phenomenal bunch of human beings. Take the wrong type of person on to a group like that, it will upset things very quickly, and it will upset you as a coach, because you won't really be fulfilled working with that person. So there's about 35 people on there at the moment. I trickle clients into that process, so I don't take on large amounts of clients at any one time. I believe in quality over quantity, so I'd rather make sure I'm working with those people on a focused level, and everyone's getting what they need. But going back to what I was saying before about what it really entails, it's the way that I've built this whole model really is about, I mean, the four main pillars to the project are coaching, accountability, community, and education. So rather than just be this coaching program that gets someone in shape or gets them educated with their nutrition and gets them eating properly, and then elicits a physical transformation, it's more of a sort of holistic approach to coaching, which I hate the term life coaching because I just can't stand that term. But it's the modern warrior. If you think about the individual, the modern warrior himself, what is the modern warrior? Well, it's really three main elements, which is like body, mind, and life. But we term them as physical readiness, mental fortitude, and fulfilling life. So if you think of those three facets to the person, it goes back to what we're saying about having balance. So everyone wants to be physically ready. So if you're physically ready and your body's in tune, you're consuming the right foods and the right nutrition, you are moving well, you've got energy, and you get mental fortitude, which requires multiple things as well. So if you can actually think better, if you can make decisions faster and more efficiently, if you can have your shit squared away on a daily basis in order to give you that cognitive deload and that headspace that will then create better pathways to then, you know, be laid out in front of you by, you know, unscrambling things and actually, you know, getting your mind in order so that you can actually manage your daily life. That together with the physical readiness side of things, you know, that really the mindset and the body is the vehicle that's going to get you through life and the goals that you want to accomplish. So when you then add the element of fulfilling life, that goes into things like money and business, family and relationships. And these are all things that really, really round that whole process. Because if you're, you know, without any of that, you know, if you've got a great physique and you don't have any money, then you won't have a very good physique for very much longer, because you won't be able to afford to eat or go to the gym, for example, right? So if you've got a shit relationship, same thing, you know, that's a house of cards you're building, right? So you have to really look at everything within your life to then get that rounded approach to be happy, because without the balance, you know, you can forget it. So that's what we really work on in the Modern Warrior Project. It's about this multifaceted approach to coaching, so that people are physically better, mentally better, and their life as a result of those two things will become better as a byproduct.
And that's, you know, we talk, I mean, there's slightly different terminology, isn't it? We talk about, you know, human optimization, you know, it's about energy, it's about emotional strength, cognitive performance, it's about that hierarchy, right? It's the hierarchy of, you know, what's a priority. And you said about, you know, working with older men, is that the hierarchies change, right? As we get older and you have different priorities and blah, blah, blah. And obviously working with a bunch of people whose hierarchy is probably pretty similar, it then becomes, and I think anyone kind of our age who, you know, you have family, you have kids, I think that hierarchy does become very, very familiar. It does become very similar between people. So if people are interested in the Modern Warrior Project or hearing more from you, where do people find you? Where do people find the Modern Warrior Project? Where are the best places to contact you, Lindsay?
So really, my main source of contact at the moment is through my Instagram profile, which is the Lindsay Bruce. But also, my website will be done, as you know, pretty shortly, and that's going to be themodernwarriorproject.com. But at the moment, if anyone wants to email me directly, they can get me at lindsay@themodernwarriorproject.com. Cool. That's my direct mail. Cool. Yeah. We'll most of my things go. Yeah, most of my stuff goes through Instagram at the moment. Yeah, but that's because I'm working on the website.
Cool. And are you taking people on at the moment?
Yeah. We're always taking people on, but you know, I do turn people away. You know, I'll be honest with you. So there's an application process that people have to fill in a form, then apply for a call.
Yep.
On that call, I might sometimes thread that person, you know, sort of thin them out in the application process without a call. But if you do get on a call, then it will be established pretty quickly whether it's going to be, you know, the right fit, basically. Yeah. You know, and I don't really want, at this moment, I don't want to take on loads of clients. Like I said, I'd rather have my existing clients doing well, and then just add to that very, very gradually, because it's better for me, it's better for them. I find that's the best way to work.
Cool. Lindsay, thank you so much for your time. I'm very conscious that we've been going for,
well, it's just flown by.
Nearly 2 hours, I think.
2 hours,
getting on, but
easy done. It's easy done, isn't it?
But thank you so much for your time. I'm sure we will continue this conversation at some point in the future. Yeah. You're part of the Human 24 ambassador team, so we've got some events coming up and various other bits and pieces that you'll be involved with. So anybody who's listening, who's involved with the Human 24 community, undoubtedly they'll get to meet you in person and ask you whatever questions they want to ask you. But if anybody does have any questions off the back of this that they want to pose to Lindsay, feel free to obviously reach out to Lindsay, or if you want to go through our channels, feel free to send it to us and we'll relay them on to you. But we'll be hearing more from you, sir. And thank you once again for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much, Phil. Thanks for having me.